Chapter 161. 4. A wolf only has one mate throughout its life. Feng Tianhin had not missed out on the fact that the man's gaze had remained on Qingyu for very long. Qing Yili had given up on everything in the Water's Edge Kingdom, and he was now no longer the Duke of Vast Seas. Though that was known by only a few people internally, the news not yet spread. But to Feng Tianhin, getting to know all these things was not difficult for him at all. To a man like him, the most important things were power and position, to stand unmatched upon the highest pinnacle. Qing Yili had money and authority, and he was one of the most powerful pugilists throughout the lands. The one thing that could make him willing to give all that up, traverse thousands of miles while condescending himself to come here to the faint mist sect to be a mere teacher, could only be for someone he held dear in his heart. And the identity of that person was now clearly evident. The look in Feng Tianhin's eyes changed several times. The lady he had his eyes on was on the mind of quite a number of people. "You're unhappy." The young lady did not speak for a long while, and Qing Yili finally could not endure the heavy silence anymore. So he opened his mouth to say in a slightly choked voice. And Qing Yili must have undergone a rather earth-shaking struggle in his heart before those words came out of his mouth. Qing Yu lifted her eyes and looked at the man's forlorn expression. The brows that were as exquisite as a painting were slightly furrowed, making the man look as if he was feeling incredibly guilty. "You're not wearing your mask anymore?" Qing Yu suddenly asked, not responding to his statement. Qing Yili was taken aback a moment before he said, "I have been taking the elixirs you gave me, and you will basically not see any difference anymore. Didn't you say that you wish that I can be a normal person?" Qing Yu could not help but laugh. She then turned her head sideways to look at him. "Then what kind of a person do you wish to be?" The man pressed his thin lips together, and it was quite a while before he said, "I wish I can become the man that you wish me to be." She was suddenly stunned, and she was unable to speak for a while. No matter whether it was in the previous life or this one, he had always been following behind in her footsteps, and he had probably never once thought about the kind of life he wanted for himself before. She didn't know whether it was because of her that had stopped him from moving himself forward. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. "You, little Yi, if I had not picked you up back then, would you have lived and you would not have turned to look like this?" Qing Yu asked sadly as she held a lock of his snowy white hair. "Unfortunately, there isn't a if. I only know that without you, there will be no Qing Yi Li." The man lifted his hand to brush off the snow on her clothes and said softly, "I once lived life where the days felt like years, hating the entire unfair world. But now, I am extremely thankful to the heavens that allowed me to remain safe and sound, for me to stand before you once again, alive and well. I have also hated you before for going back on your word. You showed me the light of hope. Why did you then snatch it away from me so cruelly? You said before that I am a wolf, and throughout a wolf's live, once it has set its mind on someone, it will never ever change, even till death." Chapter 162. 1. Even touched her hand? Something's definitely afoot. He had always been a man of few words, and this was the first time seeing him say so many words. In the previous life, he was like a shadow that followed around her, never having much of a presence, but protected her silently at the side, only appearing whenever she was faced with danger, ridding all obstacles in her way. While she laughed uninhibited under the sun, he only dared to secretly watch her from within the darkness, in humble servitude. All done carefully, like he was afraid to shatter the peace. But he was destined to not be ordinary. With the blood of the wolf tribe in his body, mysterious and incredible power lay hidden in his body. That was a terrifying weapon that the wolf tribe had been looking to discover, for them to research and develop, power that would be unimaginable once it was unlocked. The first time that Qing Yu saw the man's form change, she already had her suspicions on his identity, so she did everything she could to conceal it for him by distracting and diverting people's attention, where even at the point of her death, she had not forgotten to remind him to go far away from there, to protect himself. But what she had not thought was that her death would become the detonator that completely ignited Qing Yi Li's transformation. What was even more unexpected was that he was even able to follow her to this other world. As those thoughts went through Qing Yu's mind, a faint tinge of worry came to show between her brows. Meeting the man's earnest and passionate eyes, her lips moved slightly as she said in a soft voice, "Little Yi, it is not safe here by my side." She was still worried. Worried that that person who harbored evil intentions towards her could very possibly still be alive. Qing Yi Li's eyes grew dim. "I am a dangerous person myself all this time, aren't I? Things are not the same as before. I have enough power to protect you now, and the tragedy that happened in the previous life will not happen again. Moreover, did you know?" Qing Yi Li interrupted the young lady who was just about to say something, a hint of bloodthirsty murder creeping into his cold, stern face. "I was initially not prepared to come here so early, but a few days ago, I suddenly sensed Qing Tianlin's aura." Qing Yu's eyes narrowed sharply, and her hands clenched up into fists. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, could he really still be alive? Do you still remember back when he locked me in an isolated chamber and tried to extract my blood essence to further his cultivation, but your sudden appearance interrupted his plans? Qing Yili said in a low voice. Qing Yu's expression was solemn as she nodded. "I remember. What is it? Is there any link between that incident to this?" He had actually completed half of the blood essence extraction at that time, and because he was prematurely stopped, his mark was left behind in my body, Qing Yili said as he slowly placed his hand over his chest, the expression on his face icily cold. "Now, whenever a fluctuation of his aura shows up, I am able to sense it." Chapter 162. 2. Even touched her hand? Something's definitely afoot. If he is really still alive, then you will definitely be the first person he will be looking for. After all, for the position of the family head, he has shown he is capable of committing all kinds of heinously mad and lunatic deeds. Qing Yili said with a hand placed on the slender young lady's shoulder, looking deep into her eyes. "Only when I am by your side can my mind be at ease. At least when he appears, I can stand in front of you to block him, to shoulder a part of the danger for you. All of this has nothing to do with you, and you do not have to wade into these troubled waters," Qing Yu said with her eyebrows furrowed together as she shook her head. "I will definitely come to face him in the end, and with or without your interference, what must come will still come. It is something I will not be able to avoid." The strength Qing Yili exerted in his hand suddenly increased as he held her tightly, his dark green eyes tinged with a bit of paranoia and insanity. "I will not allow you to face all that danger on your own. I've said it before. Only when you are well and alive will I be able to live as well. You are my very life, so you know that?" Unconsciously, the strength of his grip drove pain into her shoulder. Qing Yu merely showed a helpless smile and could only temporarily reassure for the moment. "I know. So I will not let anything happen to me, all right? Having been reborn into this world, I have come to treasure my life more." Qing Yili looked measuringly at her for a long while, to ascertain that she was not merely trying to brush it off before he released his grip. The young lady let out a breath as if in relief. Her tiny face creased as she massaged her shoulders. That was when Qing Yili realized that he had used too much strength earlier and had hurt her. He was immediately in a fluster as he apologized. "I'm sorry. Did it hurt very much?" She looked so petite and frail, so how could she possibly withstand the kind of strength he possessed? Upon seeing the man whose face had just looked like, "All who oppose me shall die," now turned to be so gentle and carefully concerned, Qing Yu could not help but burst out laughing. "I am not made of paper that will crumple just by gripping it, you know. Why are you looking so worried?" The expression on Qing Yili's face did not relax in the slightest, but maintained its stern look. "You are indeed that frail. I remember how you would wail and burst into tears whenever you merely scrape your skin when you were young." Qing Yu was speechless. How frustrating. Doesn't he know that she was just playing a prank on him all those times back then? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu, when she thought back to how his always expressionless and silent face became so utterly helpless and flustered from fright at that time. It had been so amusing to see. But now, he was actually bringing that up to use as proof that she was frail and weak. She had really picked up a rock and dropped it right onto her own foot. In order to not make herself feel so embarrassed, Qing Yu quickly changed the topic. How did you come up with the idea to be a teacher here at the deviant department? Although you are very powerful now, but are you certain that you will be able to teach that bunch? As Qingyu said that, her gaze swept over the bunch of disciples from the deviant department who were peeping at them. Hearing that, Qing Yili opened his mouth to say indifferently, "Being a teacher here is just pure camouflage. My objective is only to remain by your side to protect you. As for them, it will be fine if I just occasionally teach them a technique or two to raise their cultivation." Chapter 162. 3. Even touched her hand? Something's definitely afoot. Will that really work? Qingyu said with a twitch tugging at the corner of her mouth. I'm sure they will have something to say about that. Haven't you noticed the look in their eyes when they look at me? Did you see the fervor and worship in their eyes? So even if I just toss them some half-hearted techniques, they would probably just think that it is an extraordinary method that an exceptionally powerful pugilist uses to cultivate. Qing Yi Li's words stunned Qingyu into speechlessness. Is this the same little Yi that she used to know? To think that he could be so open and candid about pulling wool over people's eyes in deceit just like that. Having not seen him after so many years, she really has to see him in a completely different light. Say, what do you think our little junior is talking to the teacher about? They are really taking such a long time out there. The tall and lanky youth said thoughtfully, his hand rubbing his chin. Why do I feel that they seem to know each other? Not only do they look like they know each other, I think something's afoot between them. The effeminately pretty-looking guy then chimed in. The next moment, as if he had just seen the proof, his eyes grew wide as his face grew pale. Look, he is even touching her hand. That must surely show that their relationship isn't entirely pure. Upon hearing those words, everyone turned to look, coming to see that tall, slender man in red clothes holding the young lady's wrist in his hand. From their angle, they could even see that man's large hand tighten, gripping the young lady's petite, jade-like hand affectionately a couple of times. Sweet heavens! What an absolute beast! How dare he defile their pure, utterly unbesmirched and adorable dear little junior like that? Even if he was a famed and revered powerful figure well known throughout the lands, how could he commit such an unforgivable blasphemy like that? Someone among them was just about to blow up when they all heard the sound of a strange crack. Following the direction the sound had been heard from, they saw the gentle and refined Fantion Hin in his resplendent white clothes, a smile as refreshing as the spring breeze on his face, the aura he exuded exceptionally comforting and snug. Nothing seems to be wrong, is there? But when they moved their gazes down a little lower, they saw that the hard and sturdy gold-streaked cedar wood table beside him had a corner broken off under the man's prominently defined hand. Everyone immediately felt the trickle of cold sweat running down their backs. Looking like this, the chief is just so scary. Luckily, it was just a table that broke. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. It could be clearly felt that there was something not quite right with Yin Ning Luo today. In the afternoon, Shun Jing and Jiang Yihan had asked Yin Ning Luo along as they went to the meal hall to have their lunch, and they noticed that the normally cold and aloof young woman who usually did not seem to need to eat was carrying an almost imperceptible hint of a smile between her brows. Shun Jing raised an eyebrow and looked at the young woman, her voice a little teasing. We're right in the middle of winter here, and your powdered face is looking like spring is upon us. Has spring really come early? Yin Ning Luo looked rather surprised a moment before she realized that her emotions had been showing on her face. She was a little perplexed as she then said, Stop that nonsense. Jiang Yihan pressed her lips together in a smile and then blinked her eyes innocently before leaning in close to say, Ning Luo, you must not hide it from us if something happy happened, as such things must be shared with your sisters here. You seem to be in very good spirits today, so good that you were unable to hide it. Chapter 162. 4. Even touched her hand? Something's definitely afoot. Faced with two pairs of eyes that were sparkling with inquisitiveness, Yin Ning Luo felt rather helpless as she let out a sigh in resignation. All right, I give up. I'll tell you. My master recently got me to go receive a guest from the mountain gates, a teacher for the deviant department. But little did I expect that he turned out to be Ning Luo paused a moment as she looked straight into her friend's curious gazes before she said, "It was Qing Yili." Qing Yili. The two other girls chorused together, clearly surprised. It took them a while for them to digest the news before Shanjing said with shock on her face, "Isn't he the Duke of Vast Seas and the Water's Edge Kingdom? Why would he come to the Faint Mist sect?" Ning Luo shook her head lightly. "I am not too clear about that, as he went straight to my master after that." Jiang Yihan laughed and said, "No matter what, the man in your heart is now so much closer to you here. This is just great." The person Ning Luo liked was Qing Yili, and that was already not a secret among them. Although Xinyuan Che wasn't too bad, as well as he was the crown prince of a kingdom, but what mattered most was only when one's heart truly liked him or not. Otherwise, it would be of no use no matter what was said. It was lunchtime, and because the Faint Mist sect prohibited anyone from preparing their own meals within their premises, fearful that food from outside would hinder their cultivation practice, disciples from the various departments were at that moment all streaming steadily into the meal hall, quickly filling up the entire place. At least the food in the Faint Mist sect was quite good, for different dishes and a soup, a balanced 2-meat 2-vegetable meal. Moreover, the cooks would constantly come up with many fanciful ways to prepare the dishes, so everyone was rather satisfied with the food provided. Mulai and the others would always wait for Qingyu to come join them together for their meal. As all the other departments were closer to the place, with the deviant department the only one that was furthest away, the others would always come in first to occupy seats in the meal hall to wait for her. But today, a long time seemed to have passed, but they still did not see any signs of her coming through the doors. Yin Shiwu was staring at the braised spare ribs on her plate as she chewed on her chopsticks, before muttering mournfully, "Why is Qingyu still not here yet? The food is getting cold, and they will not taste good very soon." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, maybe she is just delayed today. She has never been late before. Ming Yi said with a smile. Qing Bei's eyes looked a little blank, and it was not known what was going through his mind. There was suddenly a commotion outside the door, and he immediately lifted his head up to look. It was a silver-haired man dressed in a dark red robe, his green eyes dark. He was exquisitely handsome, every inch extraordinary looking, a beautiful sight wherever he went. In addition to that, the slender figure of a young lady, whose beauty was as alluring as a fox, stood just beside him. The two figures wore the white uniform that was no different from everyone else, but it looked exceptionally captivating upon them, as they stood there with a faint smile on their lips, tugging at everyone's hearts. Standing together side by side, they presented an exceptionally harmonious sight. The man was surrounded by a seemingly unmeltable iciness, but it felt as if the frigid chill was being thawed by the beautiful faint smile on the enchanting young lady. Chapter 163. 1. Heartwarmingly loyal little guard dog. The faint smile that had been on Ning Luo's face suddenly froze. Shinjing did not see the expression on Ning Luo's face, but merely blinked her eyes in shock. "Ning Luo, isn't that your younger sister? Why is she here with the Duke of Vast Seas?" Jiang Yihan was conscientious enough to notice that Ning Luo's expression did not seem right. Coincidentally, a whole group of ravenously hungry youths came surging in through the meal hall's doors right at that moment, most of them disciples from the martial department. Having just undergone overly rigorous training from their teacher, their tummies were already rumbling with hunger, their bodies starting to protest. Upon seeing that a stout-bodied youth was going to bump right into Qingyu, Qingyi Li's eyes glinted sharply, and he immediately stretched out a long arm to pull her to his chest, shielding her protectively. As the aura exuding from his body was really just too icily cold, nobody dared to come within a meter of him, which allowed Qingyu to avoid the wave of youths surging past unscathed. Qingyi Li knitted up his brows and lowered his head to ask the surprised young lady, "You all right?" I'm fine." Qingyu smiled, before squirming out from under his arm. "I see little Bei and the others. Are you going over to eat together with them?" Qingyi Li nodded and said very simply, "Together? What is that, man? He's rather strange looking. That girl looks like the prodigious all-element wielder from the deviant department. What kind of a relationship does those two share?" "You're asking about what even a half-blind person will be able to see?" Didn't you see the caring and highly protective way that man shielded the girl just now? Doesn't the faint mist sect forbid such relationships from forming between their disciples? But that man does not look like he is from our sect. So why is he here? Pay attention to his looks. Doesn't it remind you of anyone? Silver hair with green eyes. Can it really be that person? Oh, sweet heaven. I really do not believe this. I am actually seeing such an entity here in the faint mist sect. Everyone immediately huddled together in groups to whisper in hushed tones. Many of the innocent and naive female disciples had also felt their hearts flutter when they saw how exquisite the man's facial features were and how gentle and chivalrous his actions were just now. Yen Ning Luo's clear eyes involuntarily darkened. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She had realized it before, but it was now clear to see. The reason that led Qing Yili to come to the faint mist sect, choosing to become a teacher in the deviant department, was all merely because of Qing Yu. She had completely forgotten that Yin Qing Yu was in the deviant department. After the last time back at the Eternal Peace Duke's manor, she should have realized that the way Qing Yili treated Yin Qing Yu was not ordinary. Based on what she was now seeing, it seemed that their relationship was not just extraordinary, it could be termed as intimate. She had not forgotten how much Qing Yili hated people coming so close to him, where even when he was severely injured back in the past, he had been extremely wary cautious of her when she went close to him. Chapter 163. 2. Heartwarmingly loyal little guard dog, but he had subconsciously shielded Yin Qingyu without giving it a thought just now, and it must be said that his action had caused jealousy and envy to rise in her always calm and composed heart. Yin Qingyu, what right does she have? Besides that beautiful face, just like her mother's, that bewitches a man's heart, in what other way can that wench compare to her? Che, what are you staring at so transfixed? Lien Xiaojie could not help but ask as he came back carrying a bowl of rice and saw Xinyuan Che staring in a daze. Xinyuan Che lifted his eyes to look at him, and his lips curled up into a smile as he said, "Nothing really, but I am feeling a little curious just how interesting Yen Ning Luo's face would look seeing the Duke of Vast Seas being so intimate with another girl." Lien Xiaojie burst out in laughter upon hearing that. "You are really gloating here, aren't you? You can't possibly be bearing a grudge just because people called off the engagement with you, right? That is not the way a gentleman should act." Xinyuan Che scoffed. "I am not such a petty person. The engagement was not what both of us wanted, so everyone's happy that it has been called off. I am merely pitying her as the man she likes has an affectionate relationship with some other girl. With her proud character, she would surely choke to death having to swallow such a blow." I. How do you know she will choke to death at all? Do you still miss her that much?" Lien Xiaojie said teasingly, as his gaze then turned towards the door. "But the looks of that girl with the Duke of Vast Seas is not inferior to Yen Ning Luo at all, but feels a lot more lovable than that cold, arrogant look of hers. It's no wonder the man isn't interested." Xinyuan Che had not paid attention to the other girl's looks. Upon hearing Lien Xiaojie's words, he then turned his eyes to have a gander, immediately finding her rather familiar looking, as if he had seen her somewhere before. On the other side, Qing Yu and Qing Yili came to sit down together with Mu Lai and the others. They had left just one seat for Qing Yu, and as the place was crowded with people at that time, all the surrounding seats were already filled and there were no more spare ones. Qing Yili furrowed his brows and his gaze fell lightly upon a youth seated on the left of the group. The youth had been eating quietly when his body suddenly broke into a bout of cold sweat under that stare, causing him to quickly shift to the side to make space for another person. Qing Yili's brows knitted up tightly as he stood there unmovingly. The youth almost broke into tears under the sinister aura engulfing him as his teeth chattered with his chopsticks still in his mouth. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu shook her head helplessly and went to sit down on the seat the youth had been sitting in. Qing Yili then went to sit down on the space the girls had kept for Qingyu, and it was only then that the tightly knitted-up brows relaxed. He had probably been unhappy with the seat that the youth had just vacated. These skilled and powerful pugilists are really eccentric characters indeed. Qing Bei then asked in delighted surprise, "Duke of Vast Seas, what are you doing here? He then paused before he turned to look at the young lady with smiling eyes opposite him. It then seemed like something just dawned upon him, and he continued to ask, "You came here to see Qingyu?" Qing Yili grunted a reply, and on this rare occasion, he added, "I am a teacher in the deviant department." Chapter 163. 3. Heartwarmingly loyal little guard dog Qing Bei's eyes immediately lit up. "You really came to the faint mist sect to become a teacher? Can I then transfer to the deviant department?" Qingyu was speechless, sweating. This fella really idolizes little Yi. On the side, Yin Shiwu also became excited when she heard that, and she said in a soft, bashful little voice, "Can I also join as well?" The moment those words came out, Yin Shiwu was mercilessly ridiculed by Qing Bei. "You can just forget about it right now. It's already hard enough for you to remain inside the martial department, so don't let your imagination run wild and dream up such fantasies." What tyranny! Yin Shiwu was boiling up inside, but she did not dare let it erupt. Mu Lai watched on with amusement with a measuring gaze before turning to Qingyu to ask, "Is this gentleman the Duke of Vast Seas? How come I did not know that you are acquainted with such a great entity?" Qingyu shrugged her shoulders helplessly. "I did not know him before, and it was only after we met that I came to recognize him. Are you too close?" Mu Lai asked with a wink, in a slightly teasing voice. The man whose entire body exuded a cold chill did not say a word, but just silently picked up food with his chopsticks to place into the young lady's bowl. That action did not only cause everyone in the group to stare in flabbergasted shock, but had everyone in the entire hall turn to fix their eyes on the group, even forgetting to eat their own food, eager to watch the gossip unfold. A certain beast seated among the group from the martial department had his head buried down in his bowl, looking like he was completely unaffected by the things happening in the hall, but his ears were pricked up and had actually already discreetly picked up lots of information. "Those are some really dangerous grounds you're treading on, oh captivating little young lady. It's not enough that they're Feng Tian Hin, and now there's another one. Although this one gives off such a cold and icy aura, but he sure knows how to show a girl concern. Doesn't it seem that most girls nowadays are usually attracted to such a type of guys? And his poor lord is completely unaware that the little young lady is being pursued by another man here." The others in the group were staring at the food in Qingyu's bowl so hard that their eyes were almost going to bore holes into it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu found the question a little funny as she picked up her chopsticks to have a bite of her food before she slowly replied, "We're very close?" Mu Lai continued to ask teasingly, "And how close is that?" Qingyu went on to finish chewing the food in her mouth in silence before she swallowed. After thinking about it a moment, she then replied, "There are certain people in the world, though unrelated to you by blood at all, would forever just stand by your side without question, regardless of right or wrong, and you are able to leave your back in his hands without hesitation, never having to worry about being betrayed as the person is willing to die for you. This is exactly how close." Unknowingly, the eyes of the cold and aloof noble-looking man beside her had reddened slightly. His body suddenly stiffened a little. Those words caused everyone to become silent. For some unknown reason, a question that had originally been asked just in jest had suddenly turned the atmosphere heavy, making it seem like those two people had undergone some unspeakable suffering no one knew about. Chapter 163. 4. Heartwarmingly loyal little German shepherd. The reply from Qingyu did not seem to be a response she made up, but words that spoke of her true feelings from events that she had experienced. It was after a long while that Qing Yili's eyes narrowed. His voice low and magnetic as always, and it carried a subtle hint of feelings. He then said softly, "You will not die? If such a day were to come around, no matter what it costs him, he will not allow Qingyu to die before his eyes." Seeing the grave and serious look on his face, like they would be parted between life and death the very next moment, Qingyu blinked her eyes a couple of times before stuffing something straight into his mouth and asked, "Is it nice?" Qing Yili's cold and noble face exhibited a rare instance of helplessness before unconsciously chewing on it. It was soft and chewy in his mouth with a refreshing fragrance. He nodded his head slightly and replied, "It's good. Have more if you like it. The chefs here are in no way inferior to the ones outside, and you are also too thin, Qingyu said smilingly, before she picked up more food to place onto her bowl, which caused him to fall into a daze. She then said urgingly, "Go on, eat." The man who would never refuse any request that Qingyu made then went silent after hearing what she said, before lowering his head to eat his food. Everyone was dumbfounded. She was able to change the topic so easily? What's more, when he is before Qingyu, the Duke of Vast Seas, is actually so docile? To think that that cold and merciless man who killed people without blinking an eye would have such a side to him. Just thinking about that, and it cannot be any more terrifying. She had probably been so shocked by the scene she saw that Mu Lao did not ask any more questions, but to start eating quietly. Mu Lai was afraid that the answers would tell her things that she should not know, and that they would give her nightmares. Ming Yi had been silent throughout it all, where not a single sound was heard from her. She had merely looked at Qing Yili in puzzlement with a measuring gaze, and creased up her brows like she wanted to say something, but decided against it in the end. Cloud Heaven. Darklands. Luo Junyao had changed into a dark purple robe and was just about to go out when a lean figure the color of the moon appeared before him that said to him softly, "You cannot leave now." What? It hasn't been that long that I have been away from here, and all of you are going to control where I want to go now? Though Luo Junyao raised an eyebrow with an indiscernible smile on his face, there wasn't the slightest trace of mirth in his captivating violet eyes. His countenance attractive and handsome, with a pair of blood-red eyes, that man standing before his lord was none other than Little Monster. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You, the only other person in Cloud Heaven who possessed strange colored eyes, and one of the very few people who dared to look straight into Lu Junyao's devilish eyes. It was said since ancient times that people born with strange colored eyes were extraordinary. This was the case for Lu Junyao, and it was the same for Little Monster. Looking into the man's eyes that had a displeased glint in them, Little Monster's face was calm. "You were wounded. At least wait till the scent of blood on you has fully dispersed before you go out. Otherwise you might attract the attention of those detestable things." TSK. Those things? Lu Junyao clicked his tongue and gave a scornful laugh. Little Monster's gaze turned sharp. "You are in such a hurry to leave. Is it because of that little lass?" Chapter 164. 1. Lu Junyao, you've fallen for her. That is not something you should be concerned about, Lu Junyao said with a sideways glance at the man. Little Monster's lips seemed to curve up slightly. "You are the Lord of the Darklands and the king of all of us here. It is a matter of fact that none of us can interfere with wherever you want to go or whatever you want to do, but it is unavoidable that we will be a little concerned that our king is being so meticulous towards a little lass." Concerned? Lu Junyao's gaze was calm as he looked at the man, seemingly not understanding what Little Monster's words meant. Little Monster laughed, and his scarlet eyes flashed with a glint. "My lord has lived uninhibited and carefree for several hundred years a single man, and I fear that you might not know what it truly means when one starts to show a girl too much care and concern, to the extent that he has repeatedly gone above and beyond to make exceptions just for her." Lu Junyao's brows knitted up. "What are you trying to say?" "You have fallen for the lass," Little Monster said softly. The expression on Lu Junyao's face froze, like he had been shocked by those words, unable to recover for quite a good while. He then shot Little Monster an impatient glance before saying coldly, "That's complete rubbish." He turned around and immediately walked away after saying that, and his back view looked rather angry. Little Monster raised a hand up to rub his chin thoughtfully, his eyes filled with mirth. The sound of a sultry woman's soft laugh suddenly rang out behind him, and he turned his head around to look. He saw an alluring and seductive woman in crimson clothes leaning against the wall with her arms folded, her beautiful eyes looking at him as a naughty smile hung from her lips. "What?" Little Monster looked at her to ask. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Meiji then laughed louder. "You're really naughty. You really think it's a good idea to uncover the Lord's secret just like that? This might be the very first time love has stirred in his heart and is just starting to bud. Having you expose him like that, based on his character, don't you think he would just throttle those feelings that are only in its infancy?" What you did is just wrecking someone's relationship. I just want him to realize the truth. The Lord is great in every way, but his emotional quotient is rather worrying. Little Monster said matter-of-factly. Meiji then sidled over to him, her soft, curvaceous body leaning against the man's lean, muscular chest as a slender finger traced tiny circles suggestively upon it. How can the Lord compare to the scheming mind of a naughty thing like you who looks so decent on the surface, but is in fact so filled with passion and black-bellied inside? Little Monster scoffed and then caught the mischievous finger on his chest, his other arm carefully cradling the soft and flexible back of the woman as she rested her svelte body entirely onto him, to prevent her from falling. His voice was low and slightly raspy as he then said, "Since you already know that I am so sly and scheming, I wonder who is the one that is always lacking the kind of reservation a girl is supposed to show, to come stick her body right against mine to seduce me?" Meiji's face was one of perfect innocence as she blinked her eyes and pouted, looking aggrieved like she had a complaint to make. "Who asked you to always put on a front like you have absolutely no earthly desires at all? If I do not take the initiative, am I then supposed to wait for you to act? You clearly know that I like you, but you always pretend as if you know nothing about it. Tell me, is there a bigger scoundrel than you?" Chapter 164. 2. Lu Junyao, you've fallen for her looking so pitiful and aggrieved. The always seductive and heart-captivating sultry vixen was really alluring. Little Monster's scarlet eyes turned a deep red, and he then lowered his head. A light fleeting kiss was then planted upon Meiji's smooth cheek, where she froze for a moment in surprise, her eyes widening in a fluster, and her cheeks even unexpectedly reddened for once. She then heard the man's slightly raspy-sounding voice whisper into her ear, "I like it very much when you take the initiative." Meiji's face turned red to the point she looked like she was going to explode, the flush spreading all the way her neck. She had never known that when her Little Monster spoke to her in such gentle tones, it was actually so stirring. She knew herself to be a highly thick-skinned person, but when faced with such a sensuous Little Monster here, she was completely defenseless. She was being eaten up alive. The winds blew strong that night, cold and bleak. It was deadly silent out here in the desolate mountains, and only the gathered cloud loft that was nestled between the two peaks was alight, glowing like a sparkling star, where the rustle of money was drowned out by the sound of song and dance amidst all that mindless revelry that was going on. It was said that higher levels in the faint mist sect had once come forward to have a discussion with them, that such a tranquil and quiet location was not really suitable for their kind of establishment, and that they would pose to be a temptation, enticing their disciples to sneak out to patronize the house of entertainment. But the negotiations had not been successful. The senior member of the sect had initially wanted to diplomatic about it, but since the other party did not reciprocate his kind intentions, he had no choice but to employ more brutish and illegal methods. However, before he could even make a single move, he found himself being thrown out of the place by a mere little door guard. How appalling was that? To think that somebody as well known as him from the faint mist sect, whom everyone respected, would be treated in such a manner by an unknown little scoundrel here. In a fit of rage, he had immediately wanted to teach that insolent scoundrel a lesson. But a light palm strike from the other party had pushed him tens of meters backwards, injuring him severely as he vomited out a mouthful of blood with one of his ribs broken. It was terrifying that even a nobody guarding the door would already possess such a frightening level of cultivation. Just what kind of a profound and unfathomable power was behind this gathered cloud loft? They could not afford to offend these people, and the faint mist sect had no choice but to close one eye to it. When the matter was reported to one Renqian, he merely laughed it off and paid it no mind. If even the sect leader himself was not concerned about the matter, what else could they do but to leave it alone? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. In that icy cold weather, the white-robed Bai Jiyin was still dressed in his thin red clothes. His figure slender and well-built, the man's enchantingly handsome face carried with him the scent of rouge and cosmetics. Having just escaped out from under the evil claws of all those female patrons who were ravenous like wolves, his face was looking a little gloomy. Damn it, he almost got kissed by an old woman and would have lost his chastity. He had only just gone on to the back to survey the situation when he was mistaken to be one of the male hosts. Huh. Is there even a male host as good-looking as him? What a joke. Chapter 164. 3. Lu Junyao. You've fallen for her. He had just opened the room's door when he immediately saw a man sitting by the table who had his head propped up with one hand holding his cheek. His eyes were closed, and his face was rather pale. Bai Jiyin was shocked, and he quickly walked over to the man with big wide strides to grab at his arm. Even with such large movements, only the man's eyelids moved slightly, and he did not show any other reaction. Junyao, what happened to you? Bai Jiyin was highly flustered when he was only able to feel just a faint, intermittent pulse and saw how weak Lu Junyao looked. It was clear to see that he had sustained very severe internal injuries, but he was still able to endure it all without letting his condition flare up while traversing through 2 realms to come here all the way from Cloud Heaven. Who was it that could possibly even wound you? Bai Jiyan's face turned frighteningly dark as he infused the man's body with a stream of spirit energy. After a while, the man's pulse then slowly stabilized. Lu Junyao opened his eyes and his voice was low as he said, "I'm fine." "In this state and you say you're fine?" Bai Jiyin glared at him and said, "I couldn't even feel your pulse and almost thought you had died." "You wish." Lu Junyao raised his eyes up to look at him to say, "A scourge lasts for 1,000 years. I won't die so easily." Bai Jiyin snorted in derision and said scoffingly, "Don't give me all that drivel. What happened to you? Just one trip to Cloud Heaven, and you came back half dead, barely alive. Don't tell me just because you haven't fought anyone for the past few hundred years your skills have deteriorated into such a pitiful state." Lu Junyao gave a long sigh. "I was too careless and did not think that a devil beast would be guarding the area around that place. I was caught off guard for a moment and ended up getting struck once by it." Bai Jiyin was stunned. Judging by the severity of your injury, that devil beast must at least be level 15 or higher. It was a peak level 18 ghost face lion. It was too deeply concealed and I did not notice it. Lu Junyao said, sounding a little vexed. Upon hearing that it was a level 18 devil beast, it was interesting to see the series of shades Bai Jiyan's face then underwent, before it flashed with a look of immense relief that the man managed to pull through the calamity. "You are truly a blessed man to have lived through disaster. There's just a handful of high-level spirit beasts and devil beasts in the entire Cloud Heaven, and you just had to come bump into one. So you killed that devil beast in the end?" Lu Junyao lifted an eyebrow. "What else did you expect? Do you think I'll let it go just like that?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That's not what I meant. I mean to ask, where is the devil beast core? A level 18 devil beast was not something one could just seek out. Not to mention how priceless that crystal core would be. If it was used on a spirit weapon, its power would surely be so incredible. Unfortunately, Lu Junyao knitted up his brows and said in an indifferent tone, "I blew its head to smithereens and its brains flew everywhere. It was so disgusting that I smashed its crystal core together with everything else." Bai Jiyin found himself unable to speak. He knew he should not have expected this fella to be so diligent that he would bring the crystal core back. That guy wouldn't know a thing about what it meant to be squandering away such a heavenly object. Chapter 164. 4. Lu Junyao, you've fallen for her. What did you even go back for? To think that you even got yourself injured for it. Bai Jiyin had not forgotten to ask what was most important. Things that could move him enough to act upon even at the risk of injury were few and far between. When that was brought up, a smile came to be revealed on Lu Junyao's face and 2 crystal-clear spirit-nourishing orbs appeared in his hands, with an ephemeral spirit body lying quietly curled up within each one. This time, it yielded quite a good result for me, Lu Junyao replied. Bai Jiyin blinked his eyes in surprise. "Are they Antland's spirit fragments? Where did you find them?" "At the bottom of the mountain cliff, just behind the Darklands," Lu Junyao responded. Bai Jiyin became even more surprised. "How did you manage to find them? They were right beneath their noses all this time?" Lu Junyao's finger tapped lightly on the table. "Instinct." Bai Jiyin shook his head and laughed softly. "With you trying so hard, Qingyu will surely be so moved if she knew. Lu Junyao's eyes flashed with a glint when he recalled the nonsense little monster said before, his face changing slightly. How is she doing recently? Everything's normal. Nothing big happened, and the lightning blaze unicorn would occasionally come report about minuscule happenings in there. Just a few days ago, I was told that Qing Yili, who is uncommonly close to the lass, had joined the faint Miss Sect's deviant department as a teacher. As the saying goes, the intention of that drunkard isn't on the wine. Bai Jiyin said with a laugh. Lu Junyao's eyebrow raised up. Isn't he holding some position as the Duke of Vast Seas or something in the Water's Edge Kingdom? Back when he appeared in the Water's Edge Kingdom and agreed to help the new emperor in the running of the kingdom, it seemed like the agreement was for a 10-year period, and that he would leave once time was up. But more than 10 years have passed since then, and he is only leaving the Water's Edge Kingdom now, so it feels like something's a little strange. The man had seemed rather mysterious, and Bai Jiyin had looked into him. He only managed to find out that the man had come from another world and was not from these lands. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, that's right. Didn't the last Qingyu mention that Qing Yili and her were people from another world? It is possible that Qing Yili was waiting for her, and now that she has been found, it is most natural for him to leave. In a sudden stroke of ingenuity, Bai Jiyin suddenly thought of it, and found that there were just too many suspicious points in his deduction. But she is also Antlan's daughter, but she has also said she is not from Cloud Heaven. All of this has gotten me truly baffled, Bai Jiyin said with his brows furrowed, unable to make head or tail of everything. Lu Junyao's violet eyes darkened slightly, and then suddenly said slowly, there's nothing really that impossible. Though there are many differences between her and Antlan, it could be that that body of hers is really Antlan's daughter, but her soul inside does not belong to this place. Reborn through transmigration of one's soul or resurrection through a dead body? Chapter 165. 1. Nowadays, all the girls always prefer icy glaciers. A corner of Bai Jiyan's lips twitched. So, it is highly possible she might be an old monstrous hag whose soul has lived for many long years? Lu Junyao shot a sideways glance at him. As someone who is over 200 years old himself, you have the cheek to call others an old hag? Bai Jiyin immediately exploded when he heard that. Calling me a 200-year-old man? Aren't you over 200 years old yourself? Lu Junyao clicked his tongue like he was secretly ridiculing the man's gaze causing Bai Jiyin to fume inside. Here at one of the most withdrawn powers in Cloud Heaven, in the barbarians' main encampment, it was deep night, where it was quiet and silent all around. The time where everyone was sleeping most soundly, when a terrified cry suddenly rang out from one of the tents and tore through the air. All the tents in the encampment were immediately lit up with lights, with some of them rushing to put on their clothes in a rush. What happened? Is there an enemy intruder? How could an outsider possibly come here into the lands of the barbarians? They won't even be able to get past the desert out there. What is it then? Go take a look. In the tent that had been the source of the scream, a petite little girl with sweet and pretty looks was at that moment holding an old man's hand tightly, the expression on her face fearful and pleading. Grandfather, grandfather, you must not kill her. She isn't a bad person. The old man's face that was filled with fury saw the little girl trying so hard to stop him, and he immediately became even more enraged. You? Why are you so foolish? You are breaking the tribe rules here. Do you even realize that? The old man's gaze was sharp as a blade as it swept over the figure of the woman leaning back on the bed, and his eyes grew more murderous. The only thing I can do now is to kill her and go beg for forgiveness from the chieftain. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu was so anxious that tears were about to fall from her eyes, and she went on to beg, Grandfather, can you just pretend you did not see any of this? It's been so long, and weren't you entirely clueless all this time? I have hidden her very well all this time, and I will make sure no one finds out. The old man then roared in anger. What has the woman bewitched you with that you have to protect her like this? Do not for a moment think that you will be able to get out of being for bringing in an outsider among us. Not only will you be severely punished, even your grandfather here will suffer for it as well. Wait till I kill this woman here first, and I'll come teach this audacious and reckless little lass a good lesson." Upon saying that, he pushed the tiny little Ayu away with a great heave. In his rage, he failed to control his strength, and the little girl was flung straight towards the main supporting steel pillar, holding the tent up in the middle, hurtling through the air. Flung with such great strength straight at such a strong, hard metal pillar, together with the high speed the girl was flying, her head would have split apart if she had crashed into it. He immediately heard the terrified cry of the little child, and the old man's eyes widened in horror. Ayu. Chapter 165. 2. Nowadays, all the girls always prefer icy glaciers in that split second of almost certain peril. The eyes of the woman who had remained silent without making a single sound suddenly glinted sharply, and she lifted up a slender finger where a long strand of fine golden thread shot out to wrap around the girl's waist, that pulled her back to safety. In the instant that everything happened, the little girl's head was merely just one finger's width away from the steel pillar. Just how deep and profound must one's cultivation be for it to allow one to control their powers with such speed and precision? The old man then turned to look at the woman's eyes, and they have changed completely. With that one glance upon the woman's countenance, the old man was dazzled for a moment. Because the woman was really so beautiful, it was a little surreal. In the hundreds of thousand years the barbarian tribe had existed, they had probably never seen anyone with such divine looks, like one of a celestial being, a higher form of existence born to receive the reverent worship of earthly mortals, and not to be profaned. Who could you possibly be? The old man had not really cared who the woman was before. But now, upon seeing the woman's countenance and the extraordinary aura exuding from her, he quickly came to realize that this woman was not someone he would be able to stop at all. But the woman was someone his granddaughter had brought back after all, so he could not possibly not do anything about it at all. Ayu, who had just managed to survive from such a close shave, then said weakly, "Grandfather, she lost her memory and does not even know who she is herself. Moreover, her soul is wrecked and incomplete, so her condition fluctuates greatly, sometimes good, and gets very bad at times." Her soul is incomplete? The old man's eyes widened in surprise. Could she be someone who is being persecuted by other powers? You've really brought back some great trouble. Ayu's lips curved downwards, looking aggrieved as she said, "She is no trouble at all. I felt very close to her the first time I saw her, and I liked her a lot. She might even be linked to our barbarian tribe in some way." Those words were not something she had uttered without thinking. It must be known that though Ayu was thought to be just a nobody with her weak and unpolished skill in martial arts, she was well accomplished as one of the best in medical skills within the tribe. And besides her medical skills, she also had an ability she was born with, and that was her gut instinct, which had been shown to be incredibly accurate. There was even one occasion where her unbelievably accurate instinct had saved the tribe chieftain who almost lost his life. She had contributed greatly to the barbarian tribe and gained significant merit. So when the old man heard his granddaughter's words, though he did not believe them fully, he thought they might have an ounce of truth in them. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, could it be that this woman really has ties with the barbarian tribe? But before he could give it any more thought, the sound of running footsteps reached his ears from outside, with voices raised up from further away asking, "Old G, what happened? I thought I heard your little Ayu scream just now." The old man's face immediately changed. Oh darn, they've drawn everyone's attention. It will be hard to conceal it now. Ayu's eyes turned to look around, and an idea suddenly came to mind. It was not known what she had pulled out from her hip when she suddenly slapped it upon her smooth-skinned arm. A purplish-green bruise immediately formed, and it looked exceptionally prominent against her fair white skin. Chapter 165. 3. Nowadays, all the girls always prefer icy glaciers. The old man looked at the little girl in bafflement, not knowing what the lass was thinking to do once again. He then saw Ayu go walking out of the tent to apologize to everyone outside. "I'm sorry to have woken everyone from your sleep. I accidentally hit myself on a table, and it was so painful I could not stop myself from letting out a scream." The young girl revealed her arm that she had been covering up, and everyone could see the garish green and purple bruise upon her fair-skinned arm, all of them quickly becoming sympathetic. Little girl, that's really careless of you. How did you bump into the table half asleep like that? Hurry up inside to get that wound treated, and all of us had better disperse and go back to our tents. Seeing that it was nothing all that serious, they all yawned and went on back to bed. Ayu heaved a soft sigh of relief inside before she turned around to go back inside. When she saw the frightened and worried look on the old man's face, she stuck her tongue out and said, "Grandfather, everything's fine now." "You rascally imp," the old man said as he patted the little girl on her head, feeling angry and wanting to laugh out loud at the same time. Ayu lifted up her chin proudly. "I told you that they will not find out. Grandfather is just making a mountain out of a molehill." The old man shook his head and sighed. "But this still does not solve everything." Ayu's brows furrowed up, her mouth moving like she wanted to say something, but she did not dare to give voice to the audaciously daring plan in her mind, because she knew without having to say anything that grandfather would never agree to it. The woman of unmatchable beauty had her eyes narrowed as she listened to the conversation between the old man and his grandchild quietly. It was only after a long while that her soft, gentle voice then sounded. "The elderly senior can be assured that I will not remain here for long." Ayu was immediately anxious when she heard that. "Your spirit soul is not complete, and you do not even know who you are, so you cannot leave this place on your own. Do you know how dangerous it is out there, and moreover, you are so beautiful looking?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The old man contemplated deeply for a moment before he then opened his mouth to say, "You can leave after you've regained your memory. I'll take it as if I had not come here today." When she heard that, Ayu quickly said thankfully, "Thank you, grandfather." The edges of the woman's lips curled up slightly with a smile and lowered her eyes to look at her body that had grown more solid over the past few months. She then said in a soft voice, "I am very grateful for the kindness you have shown me. Although I am still unable to recall my past, in terms of the ability to protect myself, I think I should be fine. Moreover, my soul fragments are scattered all over the world, so I need to go find them to become a whole person once again." "But how are you going to find your soul fragments?" Ayu asked, her tiny face creased with worry. The woman gave a soft laugh, her beautiful eyes gentle as she looked at the little girl. "Do you know why the faint ephemeral soul that I was back when you first found me has now turned to possess a solid flesh body like this?" Chapter 165. 4. Nowadays, all the girls always prefer icy glaciers. Why? It is just as you see. This is my real body," the woman said. Ayu stared, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her tiny mouth was agape as she stuttered. But when I first brought you back, you were in spirit form." The woman nodded and laughed. "That's right. You only brought back my spirit, but thereafter, my flesh body came to find me on its own. Is such a thing even possible?" The expression on Ayu's face looked as if she had just heard a strange and mystifying story. She was still very young and did not know much about these things, but old she who had lived more than 100 years knew. It was said that an almighty power existed in far ancient times that had the ability of resurrection to rise up again from the ashes. Even if they were torn asunder and split into pieces, as long as a sliver of their spirit essence remained, it was possible for them to be revived. And no matter how much their spirit soul had changed under the passage of time, it would never disperse fully away, but would piece itself back together from different various places as the owner's flesh body was reconstructed to gain new life. But that was an ability only one with almighty power from far ancient times would possess. This woman looked like she was only in her 20s at most, so how could she possibly possess that kind of power? That was just completely unimaginable. Could she be a fallen pugilist who possessed peerless power from far ancient times? Faint mist sect. Ever since the deviant department had another teacher come in, the days became much more interesting and a lot more eventful for everyone. They were seeing how two equally outstanding men, their always unbelievably gentle chief and the cold and indifferent Qing Yili, always attempting to mock and taunt each other, locked in constant strife, a tussle between skilled experts, striking with invisible blows. And the greatest beauty of the faint mist sect, who was said to be the Green Wave Kingdom's most prodigious female, would also occasionally come to the deviant department as well. She seemed to be on rather good terms with their new teacher, and the two of them would remain at a quiet spot to speak for a while whenever she came, though it was mostly just the beauty doing the talking, while the cold-faced teacher would just remain silent and expressionless, which made him look rather insensitive and unromantic. It was not known why young girls nowadays had such unique tastes. If a man was sweet-tongued, romantic, and passionate, the girls would say they are flirtatious and promiscuous, not the type they liked. If one was not good with words, they would complain that the man was boring and old-fashioned, not the type they liked either. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. They all seem to like this type, who exude an icy aura all over, who seem to keep everyone at arm's length away, an ice glacier that was able to freeze you with just one single word. Are the girls all masochistic? Speaking of that, the white flowing robes of the highly aloof young woman could be seen approaching from afar once again. Seeing her going straight towards a particular place in the deviant department, everyone went tisk as they clicked their tongues, their faces turning to ones of no interest, though they felt a twinge of jealousy inside. Why do they not have any girls come look for them? It seems like being a teacher is really popular nowadays, and all of them as disciples are greatly disadvantaged. What a pitiful and mournful life it is. Chapter 166. 1. Are you taking liberties with me? Yen Ning Luo looked at the tall and slender-figured man with a cold, icy countenance before her, and with a clean, slight smile on her face, she said, "Have you gotten yourself well adjusted here in the faint mist sect?" Qing Yili replied indifferently, "Everything's fine." After that, his deep, penetrating gaze suddenly turned to look someplace, and the expression on his face changed, like his vacant eyes had finally found something to focus on, that one and only person. It seemed as if nothing else was worth his attention at all, his eyes watching intently. Yen Ning Luo's brows knitted together as she turned around to see. Without even having to guess, she already knew who it was. As long as Yin Qingyu appears, Qing Yi Li's eyes would never leave that figure. Her eyes immediately darkened, and she went on to ask in a soft voice, "You and Qingyu, when did you come to know each other?" Hearing her words, Qing Yili merely responded curtly with two cold words. "Long ago." Yen Ning Luo's fingers tightened. "I first met you when I was just 8, and now it has already been 10 years. She knew you longer than I have? How is that even possible?" At that time, Yin Qingyu was weak and incompetent, timid and afraid of trouble, always hiding away from everyone. How would Qing Yili ever pay attention to someone like her? And was she even worth his attention at all? Qing Yili turned around with his eyes narrowed. "We grew up together from a very young age. I am indebted to her for being the person who gave me a new lease of life, and she is the most important person to me." Yen Ning Luo's eyes widened. "That is not possible. You are from the Water's Edge Kingdom, and it is so far away from us. Moreover, you only came to the Water's Edge Kingdom 15 years ago. So how could you have possibly grown up together with Yin Qingyu?" But she had just finished saying those words when she suddenly remembered something which made her freeze. Wait a minute. It seems like Qing Yili isn't from the Water's Edge Kingdom. In fact, he was not from this land at all. It was said that he had descended from another star, one who came here traversing through time. So, when he said they grew up together, Yen Ning Luo immediately raised her eyes to look at the faraway petite figure. Could it be that Yin Qingyu is also from another world? If that was the case, then everything would make sense. It would explain how a shy and timid girl who looked so highly unremarkable could have suddenly turned into a flawless beauty with profound cultivation, and was an all-element wielder who possessed maxed-out levels in soul power and martial strength, together with all the other unbelievable things that had occurred. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It would seem like she was no longer that frail and incompetent, lowly little commoner child in the Eternal Peace Duke's manor since a long time ago, but was actually someone from another world who possessed mysterious and unfathomable powers like Qing Yili. Then, what other possibilities were there? Yen Ning Luo turned to face a direction where her eyes could not be seen, where they then darkened with a sharp glint. Her self-perceived sense of superiority, her noble status, and the fact that she had known Qing Yili for a long decade, the unique relationship she shared with Qing Yili that no one was able to surpass, had all just been nothing more than a joke in Yin Qingyu's eyes. Chapter 166. 2. Are you taking liberties with me? She then recalled how Yin Qingyu had looked with that imperceptible smile on her face, with that slight upcurl of her lips. Had she been laughing at her all this time? Ha ha, what a joke. No wonder a man as cold and heartless as Qing Yili, who kept people at arm's length, showed so much gentle concern only to her, seemingly giving all the patience and warmth in him just to that girl alone. Qing Yili did not notice the changing expressions on Yen Ning Luo's face, but was only staring at the young lady who had been approaching, suddenly pause in her steps before turning to walk off in another direction. Over on the other side, Qing Yu, who had wanted to avoid the pair when she saw Yen Ning Luo with Qing Yili, suddenly felt pain at the back of her head. Something had struck her. She tilted her head back to look and saw upon a tree branch above a familiar bit of cloth exposed. Qing Yu lifted an eyebrow. This fella really thinks that he has hidden himself very well? If he likes being so mischievous, then she'll have to teach him a good lesson today. The light petite figure leapt soundlessly and landed high up upon a tree branch before she moved like a lightning flash behind the thick trunk of the tree, seeking to drag out the scoundrel who ambushed her. Never had she thought that when she slipped herself to the back of the trunk, what she saw was not a certain beast she had expected to see, but someone who had suddenly sprouted out after having gone missing for a long time. Stunned into a daze, she quickly retracted the hand she had gripping on the guy's collar. But as she had been moving too quickly, it was already too late. The branch under her feet shook and quivered from her sudden halt of her movements, and it was seen that her body was tipping over, almost about to fall off. The expression on the man's face immediately changed, and a large hand reached out to hold her by the waist, before pulling her into a full embrace. Instinctively, Qing Yu's hands held on tightly to the man's clothes, her long, narrow eyes wide with shock as they stared. Lu Junyao was tickled by the adorable look on her face, and his voice was low and melodious as he said, "What? You're so excited to see me?" Qing Yu could not help but roll her eyes and said in indignant anger, "Excited? I almost had my life frightened out of me." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Lu Junyao then raised an eyebrow. "Am I that terrifying? So full of nonsense? Little wonder you're the lord of that dumb beast. Not only do both of you like to climb trees, you both like to throw things at people from your perch." Qing Yu snorted derisively before she squirmed her way out of his embrace. She was just about to get off the tree when Lu Junyao suddenly laughed softly and pulled her back. Qing Yu turned her eyes around to look at him. "What else do you want?" Lu Junyao lifted his chin up slightly to signal her to look. "Your little lover boy seems to be rather close to that woman over there." Qing Yu followed the direction of his gaze to see. Yen Ning Luo had her back facing her, and she did not know what she was saying. Qing Yili's face was indifferent, his brows slightly creased, looking rather impatient. Chapter 166. 3. Are you taking liberties with me? Watching Lu Junyao's highly amused face, Qing Yu opened her mouth and went on to say softly, "Little Yi is like kin to me, and not my lover. But even though that might be the case..." Her words suddenly stopped, and Lu Junyao looked at her with a puzzled look, waiting for her to continue. Qing Yu hesitated for a while before she said, "Although I know that your interests lie in that direction, but Bai Jiyin has always been very good to you. You must not do anything to let him down." It was Lu Junyao's turn to be stunned this time. "What are you talking about? Let Bai Jiyin down?" Qing Yu's brows knitted up tightly, like she was struggling to get the words out of her mouth. "I said, do not harbor any designs towards little Yi. That will make Bai Jiyin very sad." With the intelligent mind that Luo Junyao had, he immediately came to realize what she meant. The face that was crafted by the hands of the gods suddenly turned shade of black that was deep as ink, but his voice was as normal as it could possibly ever be, except for a hint of sinister danger melded within. "You mean to say I am in love with Bai Jiyin? And that I like men? Qingyu glanced at him out of the corners of her eyes. Isn't that so? She was always seeing those two men at each other's throats in such a loving way, their relationship exceptionally close and intimate. Every time some small little thing happened to him, Bai Jiyin would always look so devastated, like the sky had fallen down, becoming more anxious about him than anyone else. If they did not share that kind of a relationship, then what was it? Lu Junyao felt like she would really be the death of him, really clueless how the lass had come to such a shocking conclusion. But she had reminded him that though the fella Bai Jiyin seems like a promiscuous and untethered butterfly all the time, that guy was indeed exceptionally concerned about him. That guy might just really have some weird inclinations that people did not know about. Seems like they had better maintain a distance from each other. If Bai Jiyin was aware of the thoughts going through Lu Junyao's mind at that moment, he would probably die on the spot from anger. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But that is what the lass really thinks of him. Lu Junyao suddenly felt disgust rise up inside as he held the young lady's slender waist in his arm. His good-looking face then showed an evil smile as he slowly leaned in close to her, his warm breath splashing over the smooth skin of the young lady's neck. His voice was low and alluringly magnetic as he said, "Although I do not know how you came up with such a horrifying thought in your mind, but don't you want to try and see whether I really like men or not?" The man's face was just inches away, till his thick, luscious eyelashes could be clearly seen. But Qingyu's face remained calm and composed, instead of turning red-faced while the heart beat furiously when faced with such a situation like most girls. Her lips parted slightly. "If I am not mistaken, you are here in the faint mist sect today as a teacher?" Lu Junyao had obviously not expected her to change the topic and then jumped such a far distance away from him, but he still went on to answer her. "That's right. So, teacher, are you at this moment?" Showing a good example of what a teacher should be like, to take liberties with a disciple? Qingyu asked with a mirthless smile. Chapter 166. 4. Are you taking liberties with me? The smile in Lu Junyao's violet eyes deepened. That sounds a little interesting. Why not let me really take liberties with you? You can try. Qingyu replied with a harmless-looking face. Lu Junyao gave a helpless look and let her go. The little one only looks mild-tempered and gentle on the outside. She might very well be hiding some nasty idea in her mind to play a trick on him. Better not go too far with the teasing. Qingyu saw that he was dressed in a deep purple robe that he did not usually wear, making him look more mysterious and unfathomable. That was when she came to realize that the scrap of black cloth she spotted earlier was something a particular beast had carelessly left behind from before. "I heard that you went back to Cloud Heaven over this period?" Qingyu then asked. Found 2 fragments of Antland's spirit soul, and I have already placed them in spirit-nourishing orbs. Qingyu was taken aback a moment. She had not thought that he had gone back for that. "Thank you." Lu Junyao laughed. "Thanks for what? This is something that I want to do all along. No matter what, I am still grateful to you," Qingyu said with a serious face. Seeing that, Lu Junyao lifted an eyebrow. "How are you going to thank me? What do you want?" Qingyu countered. Lu Junyao contemplated about it for a while, like he was deep in thought. "Why not? You offer yourself up in marriage." Qingyu's eyes suddenly darkened, never having expected that the scoundrel would carry on the joke even further, where she then raised up a hand to slap the man on his chest. In the very next second, she saw the shade of the man's face change, his originally rosy complexion turning deathly pale as the tall, slender figure started to tilt to one side, almost falling off the tree. Qingyu quickly scrambled to grab at his hand and pulled him back. "Are you pretending to try to trick me again? I did not use that much force just now, and you put on a look like you're gravely injured. Something's not right. Why is the pulse so weak?" "You're injured?" Qingyu was immensely shocked. Because he was afflicted with the ice and fire yin-yang curse and the emotion-devouring curse before, the fella's body had taken quite a beating and his current powers was only half of what they truly were, never so weakened before. And now, his pulse had fallen into such a chaotic state. Qingyu's brows furrowed tightly together. "Who could possibly be able to injure you at all?" Lu Junyao said rather helplessly. It's nothing. I was merely ambushed by a beast. It's just a scratch. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu looked at him out of the corner of her eyes. You're lying. After you were wounded, you had clearly fought with another person, and that is why your pulse is in such complete disarray. You must have overexerted your spirit powers to become so weak now. The expression on Lu Junyao's face was one of utter surprise. You can really see all that? This explanation he gave was one that Bai Ziyin did not even suspect in the slightest. And just by feeling his pulse, she is able to diagnose so much? Qingyu scoffed coldly. As an outstanding elixir cultivator, if I can't even see this much, I might as well change my profession. Chapter 167. 1. Steal a kiss with a stoic face, so one would really start to think just how deluded Bai Ziyan's title as the greatest prodigy of the divine healers sect really was. It was almost close to lunchtime at that moment, and most of the disciples would not be there. Qingyu thought about it a moment and then said, "Why don't you come with me to the classroom in the deviant department? There's medicine there, and I can take a look at your injury." All right. It turned out there really wasn't a single person at the deviant department, as everyone must have gone to the meal hall. Neither was there any sign of Qing Yili, and it was not known whether he had left the place together with Yin Ning Luo. Although Qingyu did not really have that great an impression of that woman, but that woman sincerely loves Little Yi. And the woman's animosity towards her was probably due to her being so close to Little Yi. If it turned out that the two of them were similarly interested with each other, she would not want to interfere at all. Although she was very close to Little Yi, that was after all a personal and private matter. In the deviant department's classroom, because there were only 12 students, there were 12 neatly arranged desks in there. A row of shelves was placed at the back, whether the students kept some of their personal belongings. Because the place was rather far from the dormitories, it was more convenient for the students to just leave these belongings in the classroom itself. Grab a seat. I'll fetch the medicine, Qingyu said as she went walking towards the shelves at the back. Lu Junyao swung his gaze to look around and then asked, "Which one is your table?" "The first one on the extreme left," Qingyu replied. Hearing that, Lu Junyao walked over to it and sat himself in her seat. Glancing at the several other tables surrounding hers, he saw a few useless knickknacks placed on them, and things that girls used to pretty themselves up. It was a lot more simple at Qingyu's table, where there were just a book on medical techniques and 2 little porcelain bottles. He also noticed that a tiny trap had been laid over the table, one that was unnoticeable if a person did not look carefully. Lu Junyao laughed. "Why did you put such a thing in your table? Aren't you afraid that you might hurt yourself? Back when I first came here, the others were always trying to play a prank on me, putting in all sorts of insects, rodents, reptiles, and whatnot. In the end, not only did they fail to scare me, they were almost frightened half to death themselves. In order to discourage further stupidity, I had no choice but to do it this way," Qingyu explained in an indifferent tone. Lu Junyao could not help but smile appreciatively. "You're such a sly little fox, never allowing yourself to be at a disadvantage. It is most unfortunate for anyone who seeks to scheme against you." Qingyu came walking over, cradling 7 or 8 bottles and flasks in her arms, commenting as she approached, "Good that you know that. So you had better not imitate those conceited and decadent offsprings from rich families who take liberties with women. It does not pay to take advantage of me." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao merely blinked his eyes at her, his beautiful-looking violet eyes sparkling mesmerizingly like stars. Looking exceptionally innocent, he asked, "When did I take liberties with you?" "Huh, what an actor. Really cannot be bothered with this fella." Qingyu placed the porcelain bottles on the table, and she had just stretched out her hand when she suddenly froze for an instant, before pulling her hand back. Chapter 167. 2. Steal a kiss with a stoic face. Lu Junyao's eyebrow raised up. "What's wrong?" Qingyu glanced at him, and then turned her gaze to look into another direction. "Where are you hurt? You can remove your robe yourself." "Haha. Are you feeling shy now?" Lu Junyao came to understand her actions and could not help but laugh out loud before saying teasingly. Qingyu glared at him angrily. "Hurry up and take your robe off. When the others come back, I will not care whether you live or die. Lu Junyao shook his head in helplessness. Such a fierce one. Though his mouth was complaining, his hands were already moving to slowly undo his belt before taking off the deep purple outer robe. Upon the white underrobe he wore inside, traces of blood could be faintly seen. Could she have pushed him too hard just now? Qing Yu's brows creased up as she watched him take off his robe completely to reveal his lean, muscular torso. The muscles were well-defined, the lines on his body beautiful, and the smooth, fair skin he had would really make ladies jealous. But on that perfectly shaped body, several deep gashes seemingly from a claw could be seen. Qing Yu's brows immediately tightened together. Those wounds are deep. Why were you so careless? If they had gone in any deeper, I think your organs would have been torn to pieces. Lu Junyao laughed softly. Don't we have a divine healer here? That doesn't mean you can do this to yourself. I was the one who saved your life, and if you do not treasure it and want to court your own death, I should be the one that takes your life with my own 2 hands. Qing Yu said in a highly displeased tone, the movements of her hands becoming rough and callous, like she wanted him to remember this as a lesson. Lu Junyao blew out a long breath, looking like he was in great pain, his voice a little mournful as he said, If you continue being so brutal, I would be dead from the torment here under your hands before anyone even plots against me. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Yu burst out in laughter before giving the man a scathing glance. She did not say anything to him after that, but her hands' actions became quite a bit more gentle. It was not known whether it was due to her exemplary medical skills, but the moment the comfortingly cold salve was applied on the wound, he immediately felt the pain reduced by a good half, where he could even faintly sense that the rather drained spirit power in his body was slowly starting to recover. Lu Junyao was a little taken aback. What kind of medicine is that? It's amazing. Qing Yu replied as she bandaged up his wound. It's just regular soothing salve for wounds. Are you feeling that the wound is healing and your spirit energy is recovering? That is because back when I purged the grub poison and dispelled the emotion-devouring curse for you, I cleansed your meridians and renewed your body's core essence, so all your old injuries and afflictions have been cured. Moreover, most regular poisons can't do much to you at all, which is clearly shown by the fact that the spirit beast's poisonous claws have had no effect on you. So I see. Lu Junyao nodded his head in comprehension, and his violet eyes rippled with smiles. Looks like I've really gotten myself a great bargain. Just a wisp of polar fire core in exchange for a prodigious elixir cultivator. That is as good as gaining another life. Chapter 167. 3. Steal a kiss with a stoic face. Qing Yu's face was expressionless as she shot him a glance to say, Do not always think that you will be so lucky. If you are to turn up before me in such a detestable state again, I'll do you a favor and send you on your way earlier. Lu Junyao laughed. You wouldn't. Qing Yu gave a snort of derision. After she finished up with her treatment of his wounds, his arm got snagged in his clothes behind his back. As it was a little inconvenient for him in his current condition, she went on to kindly help pull the robe up for him, slipping it over his shoulder. The scene where the young lady had her head lowered as she helped the handsome man put on his clothes so seriously could not be any more heartwarming. Her slender arms reaching around him on both sides looked as if she was hugging him, and the distance between them was very close, so close they could hear the soft sound of each other's breath. Lu Junyao's eyes suddenly took on a deep and profound look. When the young lady bent down to help him secure his belt, before he even knew what was happening, both his arms had for some unknown reason inexplicably come to surround the young lady's waist. Qing Yu's movements immediately froze, her brows knitted up together as she looked at him. What are you doing? Lu Junyao's palm then held the young lady's waist, his fingers gently tightening its grip. Why does it feel as if you've lost weight again? Is the food in the faint mist sect really that bad? Qing Yu smacked his rascally hands away. The best thing they have here is their food, and I have always looked like this. When did I lose any weight? It's better for ladies to have a little more flesh. Being too skinny is not good for health. Lu Junyao reasoned. I have always been in the pink of health. Why would you find a sickly elixir cultivator? You've got to be kidding. Qing Yu retorted, and then turned around to pack away the numerous bottles on her table. You're done. You can put on your outer robe yourself. Aren't you supposed to help people all the way? Moreover, if I were to split my wound in a moment of carelessness, I will have to trouble you to bandage me up again. Qingyu considered his words for a moment and thought that he was right. The man was dressed only in a thin inner robe here in the middle of winter. Where's the harm? Already helped him with his inner robe anyway. One more wouldn't make a difference. Who asked her to be indebted to this guy? Qingyu then went over to fetch his robe in resignation. The man raised his arms out cooperatively as he looked at the young lady's creased brows. Although not entirely willingly, she went on to help him put on the robe, while the mesmerizing violet eyes filled with a sliver of imperceptible smile. Little fox. The man's low magnetic voice sounded softly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu responded, her head subconsciously looking up at him. The man's good-looking face was coincidentally just turning to look at her, and before she could react at all, something soft pressed against her forehead. The two people suddenly froze still in that position. Qingyu was originally helping him put on his outer robe, and when she was stunned into a daze, the robe slipped down off his shoulder. Lu Junyao's lips were still plastered over the young lady's fair and smooth forehead, and it was a while before he was able to regain his senses. He had not thought that the lass would suddenly raise her head out of the blue, to bump straight into his face. Chapter 167. 4. Steal a kiss with a stoic face. Faced with such an unexpected situation despite having lived two lives, Qingyu blinked her eyes blankly before taking one step back to put some distance between the two of them. Her hands then lifted up to clasp over her forehead, the expression on her face rather dazed. What did you just do? Lu Junyao's face was one of complete innocence. It was you who suddenly raised your head, so it's all my fault? Qingyu raised an eyebrow to ask. Lu Junyao then said self-righteously, highly indignant. I just wanted to ask who you learnt your medical skills from. Who knew that you would suddenly come bump yourself into me? I could not possibly have expected that. All right then. The innocent young lady believed those words to be true and did not probe any further as she quickly moved to help him put on the robe, failing to notice the glint of mischief in the man's eyes. Lu Junyao watched her stuff all the numerous bottles and flasks back into the shelves, and he opened his mouth to ask, Has that Feng Tianhin been bugging you recently? Qingyu locked up the bottles and turned around to reply, We're in the same department after all, so we're bound to bump into each other somehow or other. But after Little Yi came here, it seems like the two of them do not get along all that well, and Feng Tianhin has not given me all that much attention, as dealing with Little Yi is already enough to keep his brows furrowed and his mind preoccupied. Feng Tianhin was the founder of the Deviant Department, and he was also the chief of all the disciples in the sect's inner circle. But as Qing Yili was also highly well known in these lands, and also a teacher in the sect, Feng Tianhin could not very well openly put himself in conflict with Qing Yili. That came to greatly reduce the amount of attention Feng Tianhin put on Qingyu. Upon hearing her mouth Little Yi with every sentence, a form of address that was put forth so naturally and intimate sounding, Lu Junyao curled up the ends of his lips and said in a voice laden with underlying meaning, Qing Yili's actions makes him seem like he is at odds with Feng Tianhin, but he is actually trying to divert away the attention Feng Tianhin places on you. He really cares a lot about you. Qingyu raised an eyebrow and was just about to say something when the sound of footsteps was heard outside the door. The clear voice of a woman was then heard. Qing Yili, can you let me finish what I have to say? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I only seek to love you quietly. Can I even do that? Qingyu blinked her eyes in astonishment. Is that Yinning Luo? To think a person as haughty and arrogant as her would confess her feelings like that? Lu Junyao lifted an eyebrow, feeling rather amused before turning to look at Qingyu. Looks like the man is in high demand. Qingyu snorted in contempt at the man, the expression on her face proud and haughty. Of course, even without his powers, just that face of his is enough to throw a girl's heart into turmoil. If Little Yi is not so cold and distant, I would think that great numbers of women will be coming here to the Deviant Department to try to see if they bump into him by chance. Oh. Lu Junyao's eyes deepened, the expression on his face lazy and indifferent as he looked at the lass, the devilishly handsome countenance looking highly alluring, drawing one to fall into a boundless sea of desire, almost enticing one to commit a crime. His thin lips suddenly parted slightly, his voice low and faintly raspy as he said, "How, then, would I do, compared to him?" Chapter 168. 1. Lu Junyao is a pervert? In that pair of deep violet eyes, a ripple rose in widening circles, magic that hooked a person's very soul, unable to take their eyes off them. Qingyu looked straight into his eyes for a heartbeat before she suddenly lifted her fingers up to rub at her chin as she said slowly, "It is said that the minds of people who live for hundreds of years will end up becoming more and more devious with the passing of time. Seems like it's true." The smile on Lu Junyao's lips suddenly stiffened. Did the lass go one big round just to call him an old man? And from which world did she hear that garbage saying from? Outside, Yanning Luo's voice continued to ring out. "Do you know? From the time I can remember, I have been having the same dream." Yanning Luo's fingers were tightly clenched up, her eyes lowered. Even when she knew that he was already impatient with her, she still felt that she needed to tell him. If this was in the past, she would never want to do anything that would make him detest her at all, because she strongly believed that no other woman was more compatible to Qing Yili than herself. But now, having come to be aware of Yin Qingyu's real identity, after knowing that she shared a past with Qing Yili that no one knew about, it caused her to become a little panicked. "A person's back would always appear in my dreams, and I have never seen what he looked like. But one day, I was finally able to clearly see what he looked like, and after that night, I accidentally stumbled onto you who was wounded back in the mountains. Do you remember that? That was the first time that we met." Yanning Luo's eyes were earnest as she looked at the cold-faced man before her. "So what if I remember?" Qing Yili said indifferently. Yanning Luo's lips stiffened as she bit on her lower lip, her voice soft and gentle as she said, "Ever since I was very young, I have already thought of you as the destined one. So even at the risk of incurring His Majesty's wrath, I sought to call off the engagement in marriage. I will only belong to you alone." Whoa, such deep emotions. Lu Junyao was greatly amused as he listened in on the conversation outside, the ends of his lips curving up in an evil smile. "Aren't you feeling angry after hearing all that?" Qingyu raised up an eyebrow. "Why would I be angry? If Qing Yili were to really be with that woman, maybe he will not care for you anymore in future, and will not be so protective over you any longer. Aren't you jealous at all?" Lu Junyao asked. Qingyu laughed. "Little Yi is free to choose his own life. If he really likes Yanning Luo, no one is stopping them from being together, as long as he does not come to regret it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You really do not mind?" Lu Junyao persisted, looking at her as he asked. "Everyone makes their own choices in their lives, and there is no need to make accommodations for others, nor is there a need to force yourself to do something against one's own will. Don't you agree?" Qingyu retorted with an easy smile. Lu Junyao's eyes flashed with a glint, and he merely smiled without saying another word. At that moment, Qing Yili's voice then rang out, and there wasn't the slightest sliver of emotion in it. "That is your business." Chapter 168. 2. Lu Junyao is a pervert? Yanning Luo's voice sounded as if she was a little choked up. "Do you really not feel anything at all? Even if you cannot reciprocate, do you have to push me away at arm's length like this? Or could it be you already have someone in your heart?" Hearing Qing Yili reject her so mercilessly, even Qingyu was a little taken aback. She had initially thought that although little Yi did not really love Yanning Luo, he would at least not dislike her. He was always a man of few words and was never good at expressing himself well, always relaying his feelings through his actions. At least, with herself accepted, Yanning Luo was the only other girl who seemed to be a little closer to him, whom he had not rejected outright. But right before her now, he had just denied her very candidly. Has he really fallen for someone else? And when Qing Yili's voice rang out once more, it had become even more icy, the chill reaching into one's bones. "I will not like anyone else." "Then what about Qingyu?" Do you dare say that you do not like her too? Yenning Luo sounded like she was about to lose her composure, her voice rising up shrilly. She stared straight at the man and then said, "You do not like anyone from coming too close to you but allow only Qingyu to touch you. You are cold and heartless to everyone else but soft and gentle only to her. It's all because you like her, right?" Her words felt somewhere interrogative, which caused the aura around Qingyi to turn thick and heavy, as if the secret hidden in his heart that he did not want anyone to know about had been pricked. At that very moment, the gaze that Qingyi was looking at her with seemed like he was looking at a dead person, filled with cold, chilling murder, an icy blade slicing into Yenning Luo's heart. Yenning Luo suddenly laughed softly and her eyes turned misty, as if something was about to spill out. But she fought to hold it back, unwilling to appear so lowly and wretched before the man. "Qing Yili, you're pathetic," Yenning Luo said, engulfed in self-scorn. The man's dark green eyes deepened. "What did you say?" Yenning Luo looked fixedly at the man, pausing at every word. "Because she does not love you at all, so you do not dare to let her know, afraid that she will distance herself from you forever. You do not even dare to admit your love for her?" Qingyi looked at her without any expression on her face, and it was after a moment that his lips then curled up to reveal a scathing cold smile. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yenning Luo was greatly taken aback. The only shortcoming with that flawlessly exquisite countenance of Qingyi Li's is that there was seldom a change in its expression, not to mention being able to see him smile. But the smile on his face before her eyes at that moment drove a terrifying chill colder than the waning winter's moon outside. His eyes were looking at her, but they were blank and vacant, like they saw nothing at all, seemingly sad, desolate, and dead. Yenning Luo was suddenly flustered, feeling lost and helpless. Qingyi Li I. Chapter 168. 3. Lu Junyao. Is a pervert? What do you know? Qingyi came to say. From now on, do not appear before me again. The tall and lean figure turned around and gradually walked off far into the distance. In the span of just a few blinks, he had disappeared without a trace. Yenning Luo's face went pale and raised her voice to call out to him. "Qingyi, a pity," but there was no response incoming. She bit down on her lip and then quickly walked off into another direction. After a while, the door opened very slowly. Qingyu's brows were furrowed tightly together, and the expression on her face was rather complicated as she stood at the door. "Why? Aren't you going to leave in pursuit?" Lu Junyao asked as he leaned against the wall just behind her, his voice lazy and slovenly. Qingyu was silent for a moment before she shook her head slightly. "Better not. Little Yi should be in a rather bad mood now, because he probably does not love me at all, and Yenning Luo is just mistaken." Lu Junyao almost laughed out loud at her words. "He doesn't like you, and he is angry because he was misunderstood?" Qingyu lifted an eyebrow and looked at him, feeling a little puzzled. "Isn't that what just happened?" Lu Junyao suddenly stretched his hand out to ruffle her head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Little fox, you're such a precious treasure. To think that a lass that was always so smart and intelligent was so oblivious about this. Qingyi is obviously so head over heels in love with you that he is almost going to lose himself. How can she possibly say something so adorably naive here?" Caught off guard and got her head ruffled, Qingyu glared at Lu Junyao and said, "Just use your mouth to speak. Why do you need to touch me? I am not a puppy." Someone must have forgotten that the thing she liked to do the most was to violate her younger brother's head as well. Lu Junyao laughed out loud. Yeah, you're not a puppy. How can a puppy possibly be as adorable as you?" "Lu Junyao, are you asking for a beating?" Qingyu's face was darker than the bottom of a pot. If not for the fact that he had come in here to help her, she would have bashed this foul-mouthed fella into a cripple. "I'm kidding. No need to get mad." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao always knew when to stop and not go overboard, before things went too far. Seeing the young lady's tightly knitted brows, he helplessly lowered his head and leaned forward, his voice sounding like he was trying to appease her. "Why not I let you ruffle my head in return?" Qingyu was taken aback a moment. Seeing the man's handsome face so close to her, For some unknown reason, the awkward and embarrassing scene from before suddenly came into her mind. Her cheeks burned up, and she stretched her hand out to push him away, before she said in a huff, "Childish." The feeling of the young lady's tiny soft hand upon his cheek was subtly sublime, and when she retracted her hand, the man suddenly held onto her arm. "What are you doing now?" Qingyu asked as she glared at him. The man just curved up the ends of his lips to reveal a devilishly smile, his violet eyes sparkling brightly as he stared at her. His large hand slowly tightened its grip on her arm, as he brought her hand up to press against his cheek. Chapter 168. 4. Lu Junyao is a pervert? Qing Yu's hand usually felt cold, but pressed against the man's cheek, it became toasty warm. His hand was similarly heating up, her arm burning under the man's grip, which caused her heart to fill up with a hot flush. "You?" The expression on the face of the usually candid and magnanimous young lady turned into one looking like a startled little fawn, her alluring phoenix-like eyes staring wide in shock, seemingly highly flustered, her beautiful face unconsciously tinged pink. "Lu Junyao, what are you doing?" Qingyu pulled hard to retract her hand. Though it was with such great force, the man's hand did not move in the slightest, her hand held tightly in his grip. It was skillfully held, as even though she was unable to break free, it did not hurt her in the slightest. Qingyu's face turned a brighter red, and she said highly infuriated, "Have you been possessed? Why are you acting so strange today? What does this damn thug here really want by holding her hand and refusing to let go?" When had their relationship progressed to become so close that such intimate actions were permissible? He must have had a screw knocked loose from the crash with the spirit beast that ambushed him. Hearing that, Lu Junyao merely squeezed her fingers and mumbled softly, "I'm also feeling rather curious whether I have been possessed. Why do I feel so happy whenever I see the little fox that you are?" Qingyu immediately felt a chill run through her, and she lifted her other hand up discreetly to clasp over his wrist. But with the treatment she gave him earlier, his pulse has settled down to a steady pace, and could not be any more normal, nothing that would suggest he was possessed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. "You, let go of my hand first so I can look you over properly," Qingyu said in an attempt to negotiate. Lu Junyao contemplated for a moment, and felt that he was indeed acting rather abnormally, so he released his grip on her wrist. But what he had not expected was for the young lady before his eyes to execute a teleportation technique in the very next instant, disappearing right before his eyes before he could even react. Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow. She actually ran away? He's got to be kidding. Doesn't he realize what kind of a freakish pervert who holds some kind of warped indulgences he must look like in Qing Yu's eyes now? If she does not run away there and then, when was she supposed to wait until? Chapter 169. 1. A great battle caused by good-looking men. Qing Yili and that young lady undoubtedly knew each other. Could this Lu Baiqian possibly have come here because of her as well? The smile on Feng Tianhen's face deepened. Huh. What a captivating little lass she is to have so many people keep such a careful watch on her. But he will never allow anyone else to covet anything that he seeks to have. Bright Moon Temple, a bunch of useless good-for-nothings. A great surge of power behind the curtain veil blasted out which threw everyone kneeling below back, and to vomit out a mouthful of blood. Temple Lord, please calm your anger. Your subordinates have really done everything they can, but that place is not anywhere that all of us were able to get into. The people below the pedestal ignored the pain their bodies were feeling and resumed back to their kneeling positions, their voices quivering as they begged. "Oh, so I should not punish all of you?" The woman asked with a laugh, her voice carrying a hint of icy murder. "How could all of you possibly allow her to escape into that place? Not to mention that it is impossible to recapture her. She might be able to regather her fragmented spirit soul. If she ever regains the power she held back at her peak, the entire Bright Moon Temple will then cease to exist. To think that you are the most elite assassins of the sacred temple, this is an absolute disgrace. Temple Lord, so what if she regains her power? That man is already dead. With her power alone, we might still stand a chance of winning if we fight her with everything we have. The woman's eyes shone with a sharp glint, like she was recalling about something in the past. Her lips then curled up in scorn. He died. I do really wish that he is truly dead as well. She had clearly seen his lifeless body, and he was no longer breathing. Haha, the two people she had loved the most. How ironic that she had killed them with her own hands. Wasn't it good enough if everything had just remained the same? Why? Why betray her? How are things in the Darklands? Recollecting back her thoughts, she then asked softly. Ever since the Dark Lord returned, the security at the Darklands borders has tightened up, and we have not heard a single sound from the people who installed in there ever since. They have probably been discovered. Seems like Lu Junyao has noticed something. They have tightened the security in the Darklands because he is not here in Cloud Heaven at all. The woman laughed mockingly, a tempest rising up out of nowhere within her beautiful eyes. In order to resurrect that woman, Lu Junyao has not spared any effort. That woman is really fortunate. No matter when, there is always someone who is willing to give up everything for her. Jealousy? She thinks it's probably envy, something she yearned so much for, sprouted out from greed, that gave rise to the murder she felt inside. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yug Feier, you're still alive. That's good. A man's gentle voice said lovingly, that sounded right by her ear. Qing Lan Fei's willowy brows creased slightly as she fell deep into a dream. Who are you? Why can't she see his face clearly? But his voice felt so familiar that she felt tears surging up inside. Did they know each other in the past? Chapter 169. 2. A great battle caused by good-looking men. The man stroked her cheek gently and said in a soft voice, "This is good as well. You don't remember me anymore, and you no longer have to suffer pain. You know me? Who are you?" Seeing that the man was gradually disappearing, Qing Lan Fei reached her hands out in a panic, grasping nothing but air. "Fei, I will always be watching over you." At the point just before he disappeared, the man merely left her with those words. Qing Lan Fei sat up suddenly in bed from shock, her back soaked in sweat. In agony, she cradled her head in her arms and whimpered softly, the tiny sound awakening Ayu, who was sleeping not too far away. Peering through barely open eyes still groggy with sleep, she immediately saw that scene. Scrambling out from her bed in a hurry, the little girl asked worriedly, "Sis Fei, what's wrong?" "My head hurts." Qing Lan Fei clenched her teeth tight, pausing between each word that came out. "Did you manage to remember something?" Ayu asked carefully. "I think I dreamt of a person who felt so familiar, but I cannot remember who he is." Qing Lan Fei muttered softly. A smile came onto Ayu's face. "It is a good sign that someone familiar to you appeared in your mind, Sis Fei. I think it will not be long that you will slowly start to regain your memory." Qing Lan Fei was rather dazed as she looked at the little girl. "Really? Of course. I will never lie to you," Ayu said with a laugh. Qing Lan Fei's headache had faded away slightly, and upon hearing the little girl's words, she felt somewhat comforted. "Hope that happens." Ayu saw that the woman was still as beautiful even with her brows furrowed together, and could not help but be mesmerized for a moment. When would she be able to grow up quickly, and it will be great if she can be as beautiful as Sis Fei. As she continued to fantasize, she suddenly remembered what her grandfather had said to her earlier that day. She opened her mouth and said a little worriedly, "Sis Fei, you must remember to remain inside the tent for the next few days, and not wander your way outside." The barbarian tribe disliked people who were not from their tribe, and that was why Ayu had kept Qing Lan Fei so carefully hidden all this time. As every tent maintained quite a distance between each other, Qing Lan Fei had gone outside the tent before and had never been discovered. But in the next few days, it would be highly inadvisable for her to go outside. Hearing the grave tone in the little girl's voice, Qing Lan Fei asked puzzledly, "What happened?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ayu bit on her lip, looking like she was hesitant to speak. "It's not convenient for you to tell me? Then I will not probe. I will just remain inside." Qing Lanfei said understandingly. It really isn't anything that I can't tell you. I heard from grandfather that the tribe chieftain seemed to have been possessed. His temperament greatly changed, becoming absolutely ruthless. I am afraid that if you happen to accidentally bump into him, he will surely have you killed. Ayu said, her heart filled with dread. Possessed? That's right. I am planning to go have a look at the tribe chieftain tomorrow to see whether he has fallen into devilry while cultivating. Our tribe chieftain is actually a very kind person, and rarely has he even lost his temper, much less turning into someone like that. Chapter 169. 3. A great battle caused by good-looking men. I heard from grandfather that the tribe chieftain killed quite a number of people over the past few days. Seldom does he even raise his voice when he talks. Why had he turned to become so bloodthirsty? Qing Lanfei looked at the little girl and said, Since that is the case, aren't you afraid? Ayu stuck her tongue out mischievously. I am the barbarian tribe's most highly skilled little genius doctor. I am not afraid at all. Ayu is indeed really very skilled, Qing Lanfei said with a smile. Hearing herself being praised, the adorable little girl's face flushed red, and she scratched her head feeling a little embarrassed. Teacher, I have not been able to summon up the energy clumped up in my dantian recently, making it impossible to focus my energy during cultivation. I really do not know where the problem lies. Can you tell me what am I doing wrong? The pretty-looking little girl asked the tall and muscular figure before her with a tinge of bashfulness in her eyes. The man's countenance devilishly handsome, his body exuding a lazy, languid air around him. He lay reclining his back against the tree, his captivating jet-black eyes slightly narrowed as he stared into the faint light above his head, where glittering stars reflected within that pair of intoxicatingly alluring eyes, causing one's heart to stir irrepressibly, unable to help themselves but want to get close. Not too far away, a group of people hid themselves as they watched the spectacle. Our new teacher's coming in really has one even more handsome-looking than the next. See, even our deviant department's most reserved little imp, whose heart has little desire for anything, has been stirred up. That's right. Didn't our sect's greatest beauty come here so often in the past few days, wanting to know Qingyili better? But look at this now. I think this Lu Baiqian is on a much higher level, looking exactly like a male seductive demon and going around to tempt and bewitch people everywhere. I heard that one of the elders from the Elders' Council has been coming to deliver food to him, and I think the meaning behind that is clear to see. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I highly suspect that he came here to the Faint Mist sect to seduce women. Don't say that about him, will you? Teacher Lu possesses real capabilities. He even helped me to break through to the next level a while ago. He is just blessed with good looks, and who can you blame for that? She's right. Although our two teachers are strange and eccentric, but they are truly highly skilled. One is a well-known powerful pugilist, and the other is a legendary recognized 7-star grade teacher. I would be inclined to think that it is a big gain for our deviant department, you know? All of you should not be such sour grapes and be jealous of their immense popularity with the ladies. The person saying that was the doll-faced young girl who was skilled with poisons. After having observed the situation for a period, she was completely convinced by the two new teachers. There was nothing she could do, as their faces were really just too convincing. Hearing that, the effeminate man immediately snorted derisively and said, Don't think I do not know that you changed sides once you saw how good-looking they were. Always so easily love-struck. I wonder who is it that was always proclaiming her loyalty to our chief, but has shifted her targets so quickly now. What a starry-eyed, infatuated idiot. Chapter 169. 4. A great battle caused by good-looking men. What did you say? I dare you to say that again. The young girl's eyes flared wide, almost exploding in anger as she pulled back her sleeves and planted her hands on her hips to say, You damn transvestite, are you looking for a fight? A fight it is then. Do you think I am scared of you? He hates people picking on his looks the most, and this girl just called him a transvestite. He disregards even kinship when he gets angry, and even if it's just a young girl, he would not hold back in the slightest. Those two were the most explosive duo among all of them, and if they were to really fight, with their capability for destruction, it was thought that the whole deviant department would be destroyed by them. Everyone quickly stepped up to dissuade them. The two of you should just calm down. Why take things so seriously? That's right. Come on. We're all fellow disciples here, and fighting will just hurt the harmony we all share. All of you better stand back. I am definitely going to beat this damn transvestite up so bad that his own parents would not be able to recognize him. The doll-faced young girl was still right at the tip of anger, and she lashed out with a palm strike that pushed the people who came up to hold her back a good distance away. Fortunately, they managed to dodge in time, or they would have vomited out blood from her strike. They all then cried out mournfully, "It's over. All over." They saw the girl's aura turn sharp, and her delicate fingers curl up into claws where several translucent brown orbs shot out from her fingertips. Several kinds of poisonous insects could be seen inside, and in the instant that they flew out, the insects broke free from the orbs, filled with a chilling, sinister air. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The effeminate man smiled scornfully, and the smile faded from the face of the mischievous prankster, his fair skin covered with a faint golden sheen in an instant. The moment the poisonous insects came into contact with him, a sizzling sound could be heard before they fell limply to the ground. Trifling trick. You think your little bugs will have any effect on me? The young girl laughed out loud in contempt. Really? I do not believe that you're invincible and do not have a weak point on your body. Upon saying that, her eyes glinted sharply, and she pressed her palms together before her to trace out a circle, chanting as she did that. When everyone saw her stance, their faces all changed and they retreated a far way back into the distance, afraid that they'll be caught up in the impending disaster. Only the dazed Xing Tong was left behind, and by the time he was able to react, it was already too late. Tens of thousands of poisonous insects gradually grew in size right before his eyes, that surrounded him and the effeminate-looking man, trapping them good and proper inside. The effeminate-looking man possessed an ability that gave him a body impervious to blade or spear, immune to fire or poison. But Xing Tong was still too young, and even though he had a bonded spirit beast in his body, it would not be able to handle such a great number of poisonous insects at one time. And he just stood there staring blankly. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.